Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santy. Joining me today is Mike Huber. Hi, Mike.
Oh,
It feels like it's been forever since you were on an episode, but I think it's just been forever since I recorded anything. So it's been forever since everyone was on an episode.
right.
Yeah. So hey.
Yeah.
Um,
Hello.
so we're switching things up a little bit this morning on this for this episode. Mike's got the quote, and so whenever you're ready.
Yeah, and if I didn't spring it on you right away, you probably could have done the quote. But so this is from Elizabeth Jones and Renata M. Cooper's Playing to Get Smart.
Excellent book.
Um and actually now that I just realized the quote I was going to read is actually, I think they're quoting, oh, they don't give the full name here, but Truck is the last name.
Okay. What's the year?
And so Elizabeth Jones apparently interviewed her in 1983, and it was
That was a good year.
an article in Young Children magazine.
Oh,
But there's an extensive quote in here. Oh, Eve Truck, there it is.
okay.
But she doesn't tell us any more about who Eve Truck is. I don't.
We can find her.
know her, but we'll find her.
Yeah.
Anyways, the quote is: "Power exercised with the child means that teacher and child are equals, learning together, and the child acquires new power."
Mm.
And she was earlier talking about power exercised on a child means that the child has no real choice. In other words, the child is oppressed.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Wait, there's three of them. I totally missed
Okay.
this one. Now, I did not prepare the quote ahead of time.
Yeah, I didn't tell Mike it was going to be on him till we were chatting. Okay,
And
go
then,
ahead.
yeah, so there's power exercised on a child.
Mm-hmm.
Power exercised for a child
Mm-hmm.
means that the child is provided experiences that contribute to the development of self-esteem and confidence that lead to power for the child.
Mm-hmm.
So the child is facilitated. And then lastly, the one that I wanted to talk about today is the power exercised with a child. Means that teacher and child are equals, learning together, and the child acquires new power. So the child and teacher are liberated.
Good
And
one.
so, yeah, it's amazing because I've been thinking a lot about children playing roles of power, and in this book, the chapter is talking about the same thing. And what led me to this was I was writing about, so in my new book, which talks about these, I'm mostly talking about pretend play, but at the end, I talk about that children play out roles of power because they are normally with so little power in our society. And so those playing out those roles is a great way for them to gain that sense of power, but also that doesn't, or the other thing we need to do is that wider lens of making sure that children have real power in the classroom. So that can be as simple as they choose their play. So they get to choose what themes they're playing. So therefore, banning play that's not hurting others goes against that. But what I started talking about, or when I was writing, I started writing about all the things that how they get power in the classroom. And so much of it was around care that I, of course, immediately started texting Carol Garbode Murray about this. Of like, this really surprised me. I didn't think I'd be talking about care in writing a book about power. So that idea of power with children, and I guess power exercised for children, both of them come into play, right? So when you're caring for a child, when you're helping them when they get hurt, you are kind of demonstrating that they are worth, they have that self-esteem, or they have that, they're worthy of care, that sort of thing. But then finding ways for them to also care for the environment, for others, how that actually gives them that sense of power. And I think the more I've been writing about this, I've been thinking about power as being a child's sense of agency, self-efficacy, and connection. And while you can certainly have power in this world without connection, even then, I think, even when power is used in the most like horrendous ways, there's always that sense of connection with the people who will follow you, whatever. If you want to go to someone like Mussolini or something, like
Mhm.
the only power was because people actually followed those
Right.
horrendous beliefs.
Sure. Yeah.
So even with that, I would say connection is still an important part of it.
Mhm.
But back to the good part of
Yeah, I was
power.
going to say it's a different way of thinking about
Sorry, I didn't mean
connection,
to
but
go
yeah.
into that part.
Yeah.
But
We went from 0 to Mussolini in 2
yeah,
minutes.
it's been I'm still suffering from COVID. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
suffering's the wrong word at this point,
Yeah.
but
Anyway.
I'm a little delirious. Haven't slept much.
Oh,
No,
perfect.
but so that idea that having power, having a sense of like being powerful comes from that needing to feel like you have the ability to do things.
Yeah.
You have a way of doing those things, and then you feel connected to others. And so caring for your environment, your classroom, your whatever, your surroundings, whether it's
Mhm.
at home or in a program, just like that creates such a sense of power.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised that's where I went. But
Yeah. I um I've been thinking about all those words you just used, self-efficacy and agency, because I have been or the chapter I just finished uh for the book that I'm writing, trying to work on, uh I did a bit about mental health and play, and the idea that it's that feeling that you have some control over what's happening to you and what you spend your time doing is such a big contributing factor. And when we take away play, we take away children's main way of experiencing those things. But I hadn't thought about, yeah, the care connection. Um, but a lot of times when I talk about giving children power, to other adults who are working with children, what it ends up being a conversation about is choice, and
mhm.
which is important, but it
Yes,
ends up that does come to some care conversations, because their idea is, well, we could give them the choice of the red or the blue cup, or we could give them the
right,
choice of washing your hands here or in the bathroom, those kinds of things. But
right,
those are pretty narrow choices as power
yeah,
goes, the way you're talking about. So um so I guess I want to hear more about power during care,
yeah. And
or
I think
power's
it's the
connection to care.
self-efficacy part,
Yeah.
right? That so thinking about even okay, I'm going to be jumping a lot.
Yeah.
Um, well, I guess that's why I'm
I
on
think
this,
that's what
right?
we do here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're working with adults, like a family who's suffered trauma,
Uh-huh.
and is currently in a state that they need support in some
Hmm.
way, say housing instability or things like that, one of the most important things to do is to find out from their perspective, what do they need?
Hmm.
Right? That too often social services historically would come in and say, "Oh, here's what you need.
Right.
This is
Here's
the
what
thing
you're
you need.
lacking. Here's how you're
Here's what you're
deficient.
lacking."
Yeah.
And what people really need is a sense of agency
Hmm.
and self-efficacy. And when you are struggling with the basic needs,
Hmm.
housing or food or things like that, you start to lose that sense.
Yeah.
And so being told, well, here's the thing, and we're going to give this to you, versus what do you need?
Hmm.
And then, okay, this is how we can help. It's a very different thing. And in this,
Hmm.
that, so what people need in that sense, thinking of the mental health part of it, of like, they need a sense that they can actually make a difference in the
Hmm.
world. And so for children, their work or environment, whether it's at home or school, family care, at the playground, whatever. And
Hmm.
so that idea of, I mean, let's just use an example from a classroom of cleanup time.
Yeah.
It's cleanup time. You need to do this. You were playing with those blocks. You need to put them away.
Hmm.
And then the choice example you gave would be, do you want to put away the square blocks or the round blocks? And
Yeah.
I have done this. So
Me
I'm
too.
not,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
but more and more when I work with, children with different, I don't know, neurodivergence, for example,
Hmm.
or mental health, um, uh, I don't want to say issues, but
Yeah.
needs,
Yeah.
right? That it's actually better of like, our goal is to all clean up our classroom before we do whatever, we have to take nap here, so we can't,
Yeah. We
um
need the floor.
we need the
We need the
floor.
floor space.
So
Yeah.
what can we do?
Hmm.
And I have learned that being okay with the child who's like, I don't want to clean up right now, and being okay with the child who's like, oh, I want to go wash the brushes and just have my hands under the sink for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
even though they were playing with the blocks.
Yeah.
And just thinking of it communally and figuring out what to do and what do people want to do, that when you do that, when you create that approach,
Hmm.
kids want to clean up. And like in the middle of reading a book, a child will like, the child who didn't want to clean up gets up and goes over and puts away 3 things that got left out that were still on the carpet
Yeah.
and comes back.
Yeah.
And again, like the old self, where I wanted all the power and control, would have been sit down, we're reading a book right now.
Right.
But it's like that child went over and cleaned up. And the more I understand like differences, like cleanup is the most chaotic time.
For sure.
And anybody who has, for whatever reason, sensory issues, whatever, doesn't like to go to the store when it's busy
Hmm.
as an adult.
Right.
Like, yeah, a lot of us do that. A lot of us purposely, change our work schedule. I used to go on Monday mornings shopping before work, just leave work a half hour early, especially when I can leave food in the car because it's cold enough here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Don't need a fridge. But because then it was the quietest time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so like, why would we force kids? And like the choice is, square blocks or round ones. Like, I was not giving them any sense of efficacy. There was like a little bit of choice. So I guess maybe a slight agency in there.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
do you think we need to talk about the words agency and self-efficacy a little bit?
Yeah, probably.
We do this all the time where we get about several minutes in and then we're like, wait, let's define our terms.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, agency for me in the context we're using it is a pretty new use for me. Like I just didn't used to talk about agency in this way. So I feel like some people, but and I don't have, I mean, I do have a dictionary sitting over here, but just in terms of being an agent for yourself, sort of is how I think about it, being the one who has some control over what's happening to yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. So agency, like there can be a slight sense of agency even when, as an infant, someone's not just picking you up to go change your diaper. They're telling you that I have to change your diaper because it's wet, and that your skin won't feel good if we don't clean it or whatever, however many words they use. But that sense of, okay, I know what's happening to me. So that's like the slightest bit of agency.
Right. It starts there, right? Like,
but it starts there.
The way we handle that, if we're swooping in behind them and just picking them up and handling them like baggage, that sends a different message about your worth and your agency.
Yeah, exactly.
And that cumulative effect. It's not like the baby's thinking, oh, they came to me face to face. I really respect that about a person. But the cumulative effect of those experiences
But it does build a bond, a sense of trust.
Yeah.
And the sense of trust isn't just that I can now let this person do everything for me. Because as an infant, obviously that is most of the relationship, except that whenever possible, that same person can then give the child even more agency. So just going to sort of the Magda Gerber side of things, of like diaper changing. Oh, can you lift your legs? I have to, slide the new diaper. And so as the infant has more ability, they get a little more of that. And same thing, a toddler who can just get their boots and you have to put them on them. And then, like that sense of what things can they do. So they're not just relying on you. And I mean, I do realize I come from, culturally from this valuing independence.
Right.
And the examples I'm giving can kind of go there. But I think I think there's a sense of agency and interdependence too. And in a
Right.
way, when I think about it, the examples I gave also were examples of that too. If there's not the assumption, like I think for myself when I started teaching, it was that idea of I'm having them do part of it because as soon as
So they
possible,
can
I
do it
want
on
them to
their
do
own.
all of it.
Yeah.
And now
I
it's more like I'm doing it because we're going to go outside and they need boots on because
yeah.
there's snow.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's
I
a
think
difference in that.
it reminds me of something again, this is something I've said and done. But more recently, it's sort of, well, I'll just say it gets on my nerves. When people say, we need to let him get outside and burn this energy off, instead of children have a need and a right to go outside. So let's find outside time for them.
Right. Yep.
It's our image of the child that's determining the value we assign
Yes.
to that thing. And I think it can be the same thing even with a toddler going to get their own boots. We can do it, from the, oh God, I've got too much to do. Go get your own boots.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Or I think you can go get your own boots. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
Like, I know you know where your boots are, and you got
Right.
that message that this is a positive image I have of you, and that's why I'm asking you to do it or whatever, instead of um children are an inconvenience. What can I do to make
Right.
them less
Yep. Yep. And that brings up the self-efficacy
Yeah,
too, which, thinking about it, I'm trying to decide how it's different than autonomy, which is a word I used in my last book.
right.
Um, because self-efficacy is that understanding that you can do things. And I don't have a good way of, so I'm just going to talk out loud
Yeah.
because that's what I do. But
Yeah.
self-efficacy is understanding that you have the ability to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I think about different abilities, and so a child may have a disability or a person may have a disability that prevents them from doing something, but they still need the self-efficacy of what can they do,
Yeah.
and then the autonomy to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, they kind of go hand in hand in a way, I guess. But like
Yeah.
thinking about the same thing of like you even said it with I know you can,
Yeah.
I know you can do this. And so that idea that they have the ability to do something
Mm-hmm.
and the agency to do that, so they have the choice to do it, and they believe themselves to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do it, and then that connection.
But and I think the connection is where what I was going to go next, even though I wasn't going to use that word. But so they have that, but then they also know that I'm there if it becomes overwhelming, or
Right,
there's
right,
a barrier, or their boots aren't where they left them. You know what I mean?
right.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a piece of self-efficacy too, is I can, there's a lot that I can do, and there's a lot that I can affect for myself.
right, right. Yep.
But also, if it's not going the way I need it to go, I have that self-efficacy to find the resource that will help
Right,
me. And in this example, maybe I, as the teacher, am the resource because they know they trust me, and I'm not going to get annoyed if they come tell me they can't find their boots, or
right.
they come back to me without their boots.
Yeah. So maybe I'll give an example of this, um, because when you create a culture of this, children start to not rely on the teacher as much, even though
Mm,
ultimately they are.
right.
And they feel more confident
Hmm.
knowing that eventually you can have power for them, whatever,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
whatever. But I used to do a greeting time. We'd have like a message board where we'd talk about things that are happening that day or whatever. And one time I was being filmed for a presentation at a conference, and it was a child. Oh, the message was this one child had figured out how to make these like sort of paper dolls stand up with blocks
Nice.
and wanted to show everyone else.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh, so our next message, and just as I'm doing this, a child comes in like with their parent late, like they
How
late's
dare
too strong a word.
they? Yeah.
I mean more
Yes.
they were coming during that. Usually
Yeah.
they're already there.
Hmm.
And it's when I had a classroom with me with 10 preschoolers. So the child's upset because well, they missed,
Mhm.
the sort of like, we had sort of a theme song in our classroom that the kids and I wrote. And so, he was upset. And so I
Uh-huh.
went over, because at first I just sort of wanted to see if he would just come over to me with
Mhm.
the parents, especially like there's this person videoing
Yeah.
us.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go over. And, in my head still, because I had that power sense of like, we'll just have to film more or
Uh-huh.
whatever. So I went over. But what happened was that girl, without missing a stride, just said, oh, well, let me show you. And then she like demonstrated everything, and other kids are trying it. And they just did exact like they did
Uh-huh.
whatever a group time without me.
Nice.
And I was helping the other kid. And then I came back and they kind of let me know like they're ready for the next message.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or they had deciphered it already. We're having, broccoli for snack or whatever it
Uh-huh.
was.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it was just that. So at the time, that's kind of the way I taught. And then at the conference, it was like people from the different resource and referral agencies from around the country. They're
Mhm.
watching this. And when that happened and I walked away and the class kept going, everyone started laughing.
Yeah. Oh, how cute. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the rest of the, when the question and answer part came, they were like, how did the kids do that?
Yeah. Was it how did you get them to do that? That's always
Yeah.
the yeah, how did
That
you
sort
get
of
them to
thing.
do
And
that?
the person who was filming, like purposely like had been observing my classroom. Like he knew
Mhm.
exactly like that would happen, right? He probably
Mhm.
had more trust in the self-efficacy of the
Yeah. Yeah.
children than
Yeah.
I did. Because he knew exactly what he was filming and why he kept filming. And, you know,
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, I knew they
I
would
love
just
it.
do it,
Yeah.
like, but it was
Was
that sense of they didn't need me. I mean, obviously they did to a certain extent. I mean, I wrote the messages.
yeah. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the power of four or whatever, if you want to
Right.
like break it down. But you set up you as the adult can set up the environment to have small, brooms that they can actually handle.
Uh-huh.
Because like the teacher broom or whatever, adult sized brooms, kids can kind of use,
Yeah.
but not very well. And they
Yeah.
often,
Yes.
whap people with the
Yeah.
other end of it.
Exactly.
But
Yes.
having, little hand brooms or
Mhm.
child-sized brooms, dustpans,
Mhm.
rags, when there's, spills, like things like that, and just having them around,
For sure.
children just start to care for the environment. And like one child spills, another child goes, grabs a rag and wipes it up for them. And,
That is really
you,
powerful. I mean, that would be a really powerful experience to
yeah,
just know this place is set up that when there's a problem, I can, or when something happens, I know what to do next.
right.
And I have the tools and I'm trusted to do it.
Yeah. And yeah,
That's
so
cool.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing where I feel like when I read Carol's book or
Hmm.
reread Carol's book, is
Yes,
like,
yeah.
right, like she, um,
He hits it.
got that, but I'd never thought of it as power. I always thought of it
Hmm.
as care. And of course, we all like to be cared for or
Right.
whatever. And then as I'm writing about children's need for power,
Yeah.
and especially when I kind of broke it down to those three things, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's like what they need. And they're
Yeah.
still going to play roles of power in other ways,
Hmm.
but there's not, but they also have that sense of,
Yeah. Was this for the NACRA conference in Minneapolis in the late 90s?
no, this
Oh,
was because
because
it
I
was
was
in San
there. I was gonna
Francisco.
say.
Oh yeah, that would have been cool. No, this was whatever NACI Institute.
Oh,
I couldn't tell you what year now.
yeah. Okay. Doesn't matter if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm not interested anymore. We've
Yeah,
established
sorry.
it wasn't the one I was at.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was yeah, it was interesting
Yeah.
because it essentially they wanted to show like, yeah, you really don't need calendar time,
Hmm.
you
Still,
know.
we're still fighting that fight.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh-huh. Well, you know what I like to look at, and I've probably said this before, but I like to have the students in my classes look at a like a typical daily schedule in a whatever setting for young children and try to say where in this schedule do you see opportunities for children to exercise power over themselves
yeah,
or
yeah.
to have agency over themselves, to have an authentic choice, not just here are two things that are my idea and which do you prefer,
Right.
but to have real choice over how they spend their time and what they do. And it's hard to find in a regular, in a
Yeah.
typical, just the print schedule. Of course, you don't know how the interactions are or what the
Right.
actual
Right.
routines are, but just looking at like all the elements we try to fit into the day and the short time frames for every element,
Hmm.
and the it very most schedules very much read as power over,
Yeah, for sure.
except for Melinda Marshall's play,
Yeah. Well,
eat, sleep, play, eat, sleep daily schedule. She's the true power
oh yeah. Well, actually,
power power
yeah,
with.
honestly, we could just talk about her this whole time.
Yeah. Hi, Melinda.
But yeah, no, but I think that idea that I mean, in my head, what other things are more important than giving children that sense? And I think our understanding of mental health needs is growing.
Hmm.
So thankfully, but it's usually around we're just avoiding bad outcomes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't
Right.
want to have to invest in special
And
in
it's still really centered on behavior. I think a
yeah.
lot of our mental health
Yes.
conversation is
Yeah.
really centered on behavior and not on actual wellness
Right.
for the child. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah, like for our mental health stuff is still focused on that part.
Yeah.
And the same is true, I think, of neurodivergence,
For sure.
especially autism
Yeah.
around we just need you to be more like us.
Yeah.
It's making us uncomfortable that you
Yeah.
want to play that way.
Yeah.
How do we
And the constant focus on readiness for whatever's coming. Like,
right.
so essentially in this context of this conversation, it's, well, you're going to be powerless for a long time once you get to
Right. Let's
school.
get you ready.
So let's get you really ready to be
Famine's
powerless.
coming. It's time to starve now. Let's take that
Yes,
snack away.
exactly. Ugh, that's
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah. And
Readiness is
so
gross.
yeah, it's true. And I do like the way they use the term liberation
Hmm.
versus oppressed, facilitated, liberated.
Hmm.
Um,
I think it's important, and Carol did this in a post recently too, where she talked about children being oppressed. And
yes,
there's part of me that's like, ooh, is that too strong? Is that, you know, but I don't think it is. I think there is
right,
oppression. And Kisa Marx talks about a lot about liberation. So I
right.
think those are words we need to, so it's interesting to see that it's in this book from 20 years ago or whenever.
Yeah,
Even then they
more
knew
than
we
that,
needed to
but
have those.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, this one's for 20 years ago, but the quote was from
83.
the
Oh, that's
80s.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, it's really interesting to me the way that. Well, and actually, now I'm going to use a totally different example. I don't know where
Okay.
we are time wise, but
I don't either.
uh, did you see the movie Crip Camp?
No, I haven't yet. No.
Okay. Um, I wish I could remember
It's
the
been
actual name of the
recommended many
camp.
times. Yeah.
Yes. But what that was it was basically like a summer camp for disabled teens,
Hmm.
and they hired like 20-year-old hippies to run it, and they had no experience. Most of them had no experience working with teens. They were
Uh-huh.
just they were hired to do it,
That's what you get at summer camp.
yeah, exactly. But what they decided, because they were like, it was the early 70s,
Hmm.
hippie movement in full swing, was just like, oh, let's find out what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so were there things like where they got a recorder and just started recording, like interviewing them or doing open mics,
Uh-huh.
what do you want to perform? And just like giving them this sense. And the teens from that, I mean, Judy Newman was part of that,
Uh-huh.
and some other pioneers of the
Oh,
ADA. And
wow.
like there's this thing of this summer camp where they're like, oh wait, we can just decide,
Hmm.
and they created a health clinic. Kirsten Haugen could tell us the name of it, but I
Yeah.
don't remember. But I think
Yeah.
it was in either Oakland or Berkeley. But where it's like a healthcare facility run by disabled
Uh-huh.
people,
Uh-huh.
deciding what disabled people might need.
Okay.
And you think about it with anything, right? That like Lip reading was the main way we taught from this ableist point of view,
Yeah.
rather than sign, which most deaf people prefer. Right now, I think we're in that stage with autism where autistic people are telling us, like, no, behaviorism actually is just,
Yeah.
cruelty.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Let's
that
say
it's like
abuse.
trying,
Let's say it.
it's abuse.
It's
Thank you.
abuse.
Um, yeah, so just that idea of like we're in that same mode, but it's that idea of when we give people the efficacy or the agency,
Uh-huh.
and they have the self-efficacy. Not
Uh-huh.
everyone does. Everyone has that, like, think that they can actually speak up.
Mm-hmm.
But when you listen to it, there may be an autistic person out there who is saying, yes, I want more ABA or more behaviorism, but I have not seen a single person yet. All I
Mm-hmm.
see is that was abuse.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, just that idea of giving up your sense of agency, which is what it is. Hand over hand techniques are
Mm-hmm.
basically, I'm going to show you how to do this thing.
Yeah.
And you always need to trust the person in power, the person with authority. And you're
Even though they
setting
almost
yourself
always have a goal to self-advocate on their IEP or whatever. There's
right.
always a self-advocacy goal.
Yeah.
And then
Because
we
they get to
spend,
choose red or blue.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
And the thing is that's setting someone up
Yes.
for further abuse.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
maybe that therapist is doing its best intentions and it's
Right.
not intentionally harming the child.
But the practice and the
But the
mindset.
practice is setting it up that somebody else who does have an interest in sexually abusing or physically abusing someone, that person has just been set up to be a victim.
Right.
And we know that children, that autistic children, disabled, well, not children, young adults, autistic young adults or disabled young adults are much more at risk
Right.
of being victims of abuse. And it's because our system is set up to teach them they don't have agency, that they don't have self-efficacy. I mean, that's not the only reason.
Yeah, but it's a contributing factor for sure. A
Yes.
really strong contributing factor
So,
that, and again, it's not that those folks are waking up in the morning thinking, how can I set these kids up for harm? But
right.
the unexamined practice, I guess, can be harmful, lead to something harmful.
Impact is different than intent.
Right.
And all of us need to own our impact, not the intent.
Yes.
And there's different realms or, whatever.
That's a whole other
the
podcast.
Teaching practices we talked about, like we both talked about doing things that like, that was my idea of power back then or choice.
Yeah.
But, that wasn't necessarily harmful in and of itself. And yet I don't just want to not oppress kids. I want to liberate kids.
Exactly. I was going to say but it could have been something richer, deeper, more meaningful, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
well,
anyways,
I know. I was like, what? I've been writing lots of notes, but I think I said all the things that I had notes written about.
I don't even know if I actually went to where. Well, I guess I thought we were going to go more into the ways kids can do things.
We can do that.
I think. Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
how do we give kids power?
Well, obviously,
or how do we allow them?
That's why we allow children to choose their play. Is the first thing.
Yeah.
And within the realm of consent, right? That you can't play with a child who doesn't want to play with you, or you can't play in a way. I mean, and I'm thinking gunplay here in general. If both kids want to play and no one else is triggered, and I mean that term in the actual mental health way.
Right.
If someone has experienced trauma, witnessing violence, that might be too much. So being aware of that, then if children want to play in a way or play monster or whatever, we can allow that. And when we ban that, again, we're just teaching its power over.
Right.
And so they don't actually have agency. And it's like they have this idea that they want to play a certain way, but then they're told, no, that way is wrong.
Your ideas are bad.
Your ideas are bad, which is different than, what, that makes so-and-so uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So how could we do this away from them or at a different, whatever, like that's a different take, but then it also gives them that sense of your ideas aren't welcome here, which means you're not welcome here. So that's like the most basic.
Yeah.
I am realizing more and more that story dictation,
Oh,
Vivian
really?
Paley's idea, like that children's stories get to be heard. And
Uh-huh.
the imagination used in pretend play is different than the story dictation, right? Story dictation is the children know they're doing it for an audience because they're
Oh,
dictating it to
sure.
an adult,
Yes.
and then it's going to be performed.
Uh-huh.
So it's like they're telling a different story. Those stories they know are to be shared with others.
Uh-huh.
And it
Okay.
relates to their pretend play, but pretend play is much more internalized.
Yeah.
Um, I do subscribe to Peter Gray's Substack, so I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, he's in my head now. But
Yeah. Kind of
that
always.
idea
He's
that
your Roman Empire.
right, but that there's that play that you're doing just for yourself and the other
Uh-huh.
players. Then there's the story dictation that's your ideas, but to be performed out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's the like care in the environment of seeing that the schedule itself. I mean, I remember I started having my classroom put out the cots, mostly thinking of it as heavy work of a great way to calm down before
Mm-hmm.
rest time.
Mm-hmm.
But then to see them like do it for the sake of kind of putting things around, and then like, oh, so and so, we keep waking her up. Maybe we should move her cot. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
get this sense of the classroom that's different.
So it's both,
Yeah.
that's both community building, I feel like,
Yes.
and empowering
Right.
to the individual
And
who's helping
yeah,
to build that community.
and that's part of it, I think, is that, and that's why I wanted that word connection in there,
Mm-hmm.
is that I think that a lot of power is that sense that you are part of a community and you make a difference in that community.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Mm-hmm.
existence in that community makes a difference.
Which is also mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I
Or
hate to
can
say it because
contribute to
other
mental health.
side I
Yeah.
have to go to with
Yeah.
this is um looking at people's fear around, like gunplay is the one that gets the
Yeah.
most fear because there are a lot of school shootings. But like, what attributes do people have that do that? And so
Mm-hmm.
the Center for Prevention of Violence, I believe is what they're called, they've done profiles of every single mass murderer
Stuart
in
Brown
the United States, and
talks about
you
that
know
in his book about play.
yeah, and the
Mm-hmm.
four things, and one of them is around connection.
Mm-hmm. And play
Like this.
deprivation, I guess, is
Yeah,
where Stuart Brown
yeah,
goes
so
with it,
he
but
he talked about play
connection for sure.
deprivation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they talk about basically it's that um yeah, lack of connection, um an acute crisis
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what leads to this specific shooting, and then access to firearms.
Mm-hmm. Of
And
course.
then I forgot what the fourth one is now off the top of my head. But just that sense of going to the worst case scenario. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, like connection is a huge part of power.
Right.
When people feel powerless, they're prone to people who are going to give them the scapegoat. Oh, the
Yeah.
reason you're feeling this way is because of these people
Sure.
and what they're doing, right? That it's
Mhm.
like you should have power, but you don't because of them.
Because of them.
And when you're feeling connected and feeling like you have power, you feel like you know, and again, that connection, they are connecting to those, the people
Yeah.
who are giving the scapegoats. But that's the thing, is they were needing connection and they couldn't figure out a way to connect to the wider community. So suddenly it's connecting based on this idea of us versus them,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Okay.
I think a lot of people in history have like
Right.
used specifically.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a powerful
yes,
dichotomy.
exactly. So just going to that other extreme, but connection, just feeling you're part of the community and feeling ways to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And so then finding that way, and how does each person connect? And some people it's going to be around cleaning or putting out the cots.
Mm-hmm.
Some people it's going to be telling stories, or some people it's going to be, whatever play they do, or
Yeah.
making, the kids who make drawings for others,
Mm-hmm.
or just give kids things, that it could
Right.
just be
Yes.
the random, like, oh, here's a block I found over here. I'm
Yes.
giving it to you, or the rock on the wall.
Yeah, assigning roles in pretend play. I think all the chase games, the bad
Mm-hmm.
guy chase games, are
Yep.
really about connecting.
Yep.
Um, And
Yeah,
pretending.
I know another thing I learned from Elizabeth Jones. So I guess it was probably master players,
Uh-huh.
but that idea that the kid who can connect, they're not like forcing kids to do things. They know what role the person wants, and they're just telling them, "Yeah, you take this role." And
Uh-huh.
so it's like they're kind of scaffolding self-efficacy. Like,
Yeah. It's the more knowledgeable other,
right, right,
providing some scaffolding.
yeah, yeah. So,
Uh,
and then of course, as long as that person has agency to say, like, "No, I don't want to do that today."
right. Stop chasing me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, so I feel like a lot of the and just classroom things, anytime you're doing power over, how could the kids be part of that? And
Mhm.
there are times, of course, we're not going to run in the street.
Right. Yeah. But it's the old story that we've said many times, probably, when they have a lot of experience with us making sure they have power for or power
Yeah,
with. When we do have to have power over, it's we can be more effective. Like when
right.
we do need to have them stop suddenly
Yeah,
whatever's happening to keep them safe, because they've had all these experiences of not being controlled by us.
right,
It's
right,
easier for them to say, oh, what, this must be really important, I'll
right.
stop, you know.
And the other kind of the way I think you can see that is power reversal play, which I think
Mm.
Teaching with the Body and Mind just did an episode on. So I won't do an episode here, but no, but just that idea when the child is putting you in prison or giving you
Uh-huh.
poison or
Yeah.
giving you shots or whatever, they're the one in power and you are
Uh-huh.
not. But in that episode, Joey pointed out that that takes a lot of trust because the
Mm.
child is really saying, in this meta narrative, I know actually if something happens in this play and I get hurt, you are going to take care of me.
Mhm.
But right now, I'm going to pretend I'm in control of you and you're going to let me.
Mhm.
And I feel like the person who is less likely to give up control with all the other things is also less likely to play that way.
Oh, sure.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because now it's
Yes.
even that's testing their authority. And it's like that idea that when you feel out of control, you want more control.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when you're feeling out of control in the classroom, giving children more agency
Mhm.
actually tends to make you feel more in control in the long run. But there is a letting go you have to have, which is self efficacy. You have to trust that you are good enough that if it does go off the rails, you can still keep everyone safe, but you can give the others in the room agency,
Mhm.
and you're not, it's the candle metaphor for power, not you
Yeah.
don't lose your
Whatever the
power
other
by
one is.
giving power to others.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not
not pie.
it's not pie. Yeah, exactly. Um, and once you start to understand that, it's like, oh, you can really do a lot of stuff. Because
Uh-huh.
suddenly when the kids are putting out the cots, I can help that one kid who's feeling sad
Mm.
at rest
Yeah.
time. Because I'm not also trying to do all the other things and getting kind of short with the kid of like,
Mhm.
just clean up.
Yes,
I got to get all
exactly.
these cots out and get all
Yes.
the other kids down for nap. It's more
Yeah.
like, oh, what's
Yeah.
going on?
Right.
Oh, you're really, do you want me to help you clean up? And while you're cleaning up, like, you seem kind of sad today.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
mom's out of town. Oh, whatever. And you can have that one-on-one conversation
Yeah.
that you couldn't at those like care routine times when you think that it's only you that can do them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Kids love to put those cots out.
it's true. It's true. And stacking
It's a
chairs
good
is the other big one,
example.
right? That I
Oh,
always
yeah.
stack chairs.
Yeah.
You can get a chair if you want one, but
We can't stack chairs in Indiana.
okay. Put them along the wall.
Yeah. At least we
I think
didn't.
this came up once before.
Yeah. 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 So I also have not been keeping track of time, but it feels like probably we
Yeah,
should
I
wind
think
this
that
one
was
up. But thanks, Mike. This was fun. It's always it's always fun to talk to you, but I love these conversations where it's you working on your writing or the Mike Asks Heather episodes where we're just going
yeah,
wherever it
all
takes
over the
us.
place.
Yeah.
This gives me
Yeah.
a lot to write about,
Oh,
though.
good.
We'll see what
Excellent.
ends up in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know how to spell my name. So that's all that matters. Get the name right.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyway, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.